Wow, nice haul.
Told ya, Macy's Backstage has perfect last-minute gifts.
With prices so low, you never need a coupon.
I scored the perfect makeup palette.
Super cute. I grabbed these cool drones for the guys.
Nice. Here's a handbag for Aunt Helen.
Found awesome toys for the kids.
Cookware for the budding chef.
Oh, and look what I got for Uncle Hank.
A puppy chew toy?
No, that's for Rex. They even have gifts for pets.
Well, you know Uncle Hank. He'd love anything we gave him.
Macy's Backstage. Savings for everyday life. Details at macy'sbackstage.com.
Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact to their clients and communities, and you can find Nonprofit U on Facebook and Twitter. I encourage you to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU or Moral Mondays. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is open, and you can post comments and questions. In order to use the chat room, you must open a listener-only account, and you'll find a link to open the account on the episode page. And you can also email me questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com or send messages through Facebook and Twitter. You'll find a Nonprofit U fan page on Facebook, and the Twitter account is @NonprofitU. We'll be taking questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. Today's episode is Moral Mondays. We'll discuss the origins of the Poor People's Campaign and its relevance today, and we'll also have an overview of upcoming trainings and activities and let you know how you can get involved in the movement. Again, we encourage you to call in with questions and to participate in live chats at about the 30-minute mark, although if you're in a chat room, you don't have to wait 30 minutes. You can start posting now. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. We're looking especially for activists and nonprofit professionals and even those residents who are just generally concerned with what's going on in the community. We're encouraging all of you to call in, although this is not exclusive. Anyone can call. The Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis and Carolina Gaete. The Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis is co-director of the Kairos Center as well as a founder and coordinator of the Poverty Initiative. She has spent the last 2 decades organizing amongst the poor in the United States, working with grassroots organizations like the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, and forgive me if I have butchered that name. She has also worked with the Vermont Workers Center, Domestic Workers United, the United Workers Association, the National Union of the Homeless, and the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. She is national co-director of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and author of Always With Us, What Jesus Really Said About the Poor. She is also an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church in the United States and a biblical scholar in the New Testament and Christian origins. Our second guest is Carolina Gaete. She is the co-director of Blocks Together, and Blocks Together is a membership-based community organization in Chicago. They focus on organizing and grassroots leadership development. They're located in the Humboldt Park community, or rather the West community, and that is on Chicago's west side for those of you who are listening from other cities. Since 1995, Blocks Together has empowered residents to work together for systemic changes that bring concrete improvement to their lives. Blocks Together tackles social justice issues relating to education, housing, economic justice, and the criminalization of youth. Some of their most notable work includes participating on the Chicago Educational Facilities Task Force, which advocates for equity and transparency around school facilities, closures, and boundaries. And if you live in Chicago, you know their work is never done. They have also worked with local school councils and community-based organizations around the city on issues surrounding school utilization and closures, advocacy around tax reform and TIFs, equitable school funding, and supporting a referendum for an elected school board. Blacks Together began their work on TIFs in earnest in 2008, and when I say TIFs, I'm talking about tax increment financing. And they wanted in 2008 to better understand the relationship between TIFs and school fundings as well as school closures, and they have learned a whole lot, and they have been on our show before, and you can look at a couple of the past episodes. One is the People's TIFs, and then they did a TIF toolkit. So the focus of our conversation for today is going to be on Moral Mondays, as well as the Poor People's Campaign on the national level as well as the local level. So without further ado, I want to thank each of you for being on Nonprofit U today. It's been an honor to have you. And we'll start with Reverend Theoharis. What is poverty in America and some of the issues and impacts you're seeking and seeing in your work?
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be there, and I'm really looking forward to coming to Chicago this coming week. Poverty is very widespread in the United States. In fact, statistics say that 1 in 2 Americans are poor or low income.
Oh, my goodness. Can I stop you right there, Reverend Theoharis?
Yeah.
Can I stop you right there?
Yes. Of course.
It's interesting that the statistic now is 1/2 versus 33% when Martin Luther King started.
That's
sounding.
right.
It was
That's
so
right.
astounding. I had to interrupt you, and I do apologize for that.
No, it's right. I mean, and in fact, it's even worse than that, which is that 80% of people in the United States at some point in their life will experience poverty and hardship.
Wow.
And so this is a widespread problem. This is a problem that affects people of all ages, of all genders, of all races, of all geographies. Obviously, it disproportionately affects people of color. It disproportionately affects women and children. It disproportionately affects immigrants. But, in some ways, poverty really knows no color and no boundary because everyone is impacted by it. And it's really only getting worse. I mean, as you point out, 50 years ago, when it was a major problem and a problem that, in fact, the Reverend Dr. King called a curse, it's really got worse since then. And so what we've been trying to do at the Kairos Center, and as we've been building this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is try to connect up with grassroots organizations, many of them led by people that are most impacted by poverty and racism and discrimination and ecological devastation, all of the problems that kind of assert themselves when people are poor and marginalized. We've tried to link up with organizations led by those that are most impacted and weave them into a larger network, a larger movement that could be a powerful voice for people and for communities and change what's going on. And so a lot of what we're trying to do actually is shift the moral narrative, talk about the fact that the real issues that affect the vast majority of people in this country, the vast majority of the time, are issues like the lack of health care or inadequate housing or wages that are way too low to be able to, adequately feed families and clothe and house families. And so that these issues are the issues that all of our politicians, all of the people in society should be actually trying to come up with solutions around. And that what we need to do is organize and unite poor people and all people of conscience to really abolish, eradicate poverty.
Oh, that is awesome. And before I bring Caro into the conversation, I just wanted to ask you to define Kairos. Kairos? Is it Kairos or Kairos?
Yeah. So it's Kairos. It's a Greek word, and it's kind of from biblical times. It's a word that's kind of biblically used, and it means the inbreaking of something new, the dying of old things. It's a time. It's not chronos time. It's not linear time. It's a time when movements are born, when change is possible, when people are trying to make a difference in terms of the world and make it better for everyone. And so we named our center the Kairos Center because we felt like, there were new movements that were breaking out and that something new needed to be born, and that these were times when that kind of change was possible and was going to be needed.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Okay, Caro. Okay, you're welcome. Caro, you're next.
Hi, Valerie.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate working with you, and you're being I would almost call you a regular guest these days. You have so much work that you can share with us. So
thank you for having us here on.
Drilling down to the community level, and when we look at the community, we're talking about West Humboldt Park and North Lawndale, and you may have other examples from other communities because you're just active everywhere. What are some of the issues that you're seeing on the ground as they relate to poverty?
And thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Some of the issues that we're confronting, we can focus really on the west side, which also includes Garfield Park and Austin, is we have been seeing how city governments and leaders have really, by design, created pockets of poverty by not investing in communities. We've seen, like in the west side, the closing of public infrastructure, schools, mental health clinics. And there hasn't been a reinvestment of our public dollars back into our community. So we're seeing what these concentrations of poverty look like by displaced communities, meaning communities that have been priced out of the neighborhood. For example, what we see in East Humboldt Park, and then the shift of West Humboldt Park, maybe 15 years ago, was predominantly a black community. But due to communities of Latinos being displaced from West Humboldt Park, West Town has created, a shift, right, and people moving west. Also, the breaking down of public housing has created a shift. So what has created these pockets of poverty and influx of residents without providing the resources and infrastructures needed. Right, so that also led to the criminalization of our communities. We're seeing how our youth, right, how we're seeing how there's more investments coming in to schools to criminalize our students, right, rather than provide investment and supportive systems and this emotional learning for them, right, supporting their growth, addressing the trauma that is faced by being a youth of color in this community, right? And if you're poor too, so what are all those traumas that are connected to our communities that are being displaced, that are being criminalized, so the displacement can go a little bit faster, right? How they're taking public dollars and using it to develop elsewhere and using it to displace us, right? So then, and also we're seeing the issue of environmental injustice, right? We've seen how schools like Orr had lead in their water and the parks. And so we're seeing how this issue of poverty is being addressed in so many different phases of our lives, right? In our schooling, in our homes, in our health care, in our education, in the criminal justice system. So that's what we're currently facing in West Humboldt Park, Garfield Park, and part of London. We're seeing a shift, right, and also displaced communities, but also people that want to come and and developers. So there's rapid change happening in our communities.
Yes. I can definitely relate. When my dad was alive, he would always describe living in North Lawndale and communities similar to it. It's like you're fighting a hydra-headed monster, because there's so many different issues coming at us all at once. And for those of you who are into Greek mythology, and I had a few more birthdays than you, so I might be dating myself, and I might be I might not have the facts all correct, but in Greek mythology, I believe it was Jason, and in his adventures, he ended up, or was it Hercules? One of them ended up fighting a hydra, which had multiple heads or whatever, and he just kept fighting and fighting, and it seems like as soon as he would kill off one head or whatever, it would grow another head or another tentacle, and he was just constantly fighting, and
that's exactly what we're constantly seeing, right? How they're constantly creating different policies and different trends and different practices, but at the end of the day, it's looking how they're trying is this really push of the displacement of the poor and pricing out of the poor of Chicago, right? So they're going to create different mechanisms and different structures to be able to do that. And we've seen how the TIFs are one tool, right, that has created this lack of resources and lack of divestment in our community.
Yes. So, so if it's not TIFs, then it's the schools. If it's not schools, then at one point it was the Olympics that could have potentially displaced people. And all of this stuff is going on at once, and it seems to be the same people fighting all of this stuff. So it gets a little tiring. Right, Kato?
But also inspiring, right, to see that people are there and don't give up and understand that this is a fight that's there for the long haul, right? It's not just about taking little steps and considering it a victory, right? So in order to win, and victory is not an option, right? So we have to change structures and systems and practices that allow for this to happen, right? That allow for people to be uninsured, that allowed our kids to be gunned down in the streets, that allowed a criminal justice system that preys on the poor and the youth of color, right? So it's going to take a lot, right? So we got to stay inspired for the long haul of the fight, because I see victory, and it's inspiring to see different people of different ages joining in the fight.
Yes. Okay, so Dr. Theoharis, founder of the Kairos Center, as well as the co-founder and director of the Poverty Initiative. Can you give us an overview of the Kairos Center and the Poverty Initiative, as well as tell us how you came to this work? And I realize that's a lot of information in one question.
No, that sounds great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So I have been involved in grassroots anti-poverty work for almost 25 years now. I met up when I moved to Philadelphia. I met up with the National Union of the Homeless and then later the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. And those were efforts of poor and homeless people organizing and fighting, for themselves and to really put an end to poverty, to an end of homelessness. So the movement led by those that are most impacted. And so I got involved and was introduced at that point to a history of poor people organizing in this country that dated back to the Poor People's Campaign that Martin Luther King was doing the last year of his life, but also that connected to other movements in the U.S. history, whether it was the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, the sharecroppers, or even folks that were a part of abolition and the ending of slavery. And so the Poverty Initiative and the Kairos Center come out of that kind of rich history, that genealogy of poor people organizing ourselves and trying to transform society for the better for everyone. And so I helped to found both of those organizations. The Kairos Center is basically the umbrella organization to the Poverty Initiative, and our work is been focused for the past 3 or 4 years really on trying to build this Poor People's Campaign, try to unite different struggles of taxi workers and farm workers and domestic workers and folks without health insurance folks that are battling, that many tentacled monster that we were just talking about, and trying to come to a place where we could actually, get rid of that monster and all of the evils that it represents, and try to, change things for the better for everyone. And so for the last couple of years, what we've been doing is networking different organizations and groups, and having a chance to kind of talk about what a platform and a program for a Poor People's Campaign would look like, and talk about, what kind of society we want our families to be living in. And we've seen, over the last year or so, working particularly with the Forward Together Moral Mondays movement out of North Carolina, the need really for a moral revival in this nation, for changing the values, valuing human life and not corporate greed, making sure that everyone has health care and not that you can cut people off or try to sneak things through around people or raise people's rates in these crazy ways. And so what the Kairos Center is focused on is raising up generations of religious and community leaders who are committed to this campaign and to a movement, and to transforming of life for everyone.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you so much. So, Caro, you've been focused on developing grassroots leadership in Humboldt Park in a number of areas. I see you're involved in small business development, education as it relates to school closings and other actions, and making sure that TIF funds are budgeted with input from local residents and distributed in a manner in which they can directly benefit the community. And for people who are outside of Chicago, this may sound like it's not that big of a deal, but in Chicago, this is heresy. So just to give you some sense of the impact of the work that she has done. Typically in Chicago, we have a history of our TIF funds being tightly controlled by our mayor and our elected officials, and very seldom does the community have very direct benefit, although there is development in the community. But, the residents themselves who are financing the TIFs rarely benefit directly. So Caro and her group are doing some wonderful work to make sure that people benefit, residents as well as small business owners. But I'm here today to talk about the Moral Monday. So, Caro, what brings you to this work with the Poor People's Campaign, and how did you get involved?
Well, about a year and a half or so ago, I connected with Shali, who works for the Kairos Center, and we met here in Chicago, and she told me about what was coming together, and it really resonated with the work we were doing here on our economic justice work, and so we brought that two blocks together, and, we waited for the membership to agree and adopt it, and so for us, it became a way to frame our economic justice work, our education work, and our criminalization work really under one frame, which was the poor people's frame. And that's really who we work with, who our members are, who we are, so it really makes sense to look at it, especially when some of our members have been talking about their frustration with hearing elected officials always refer to the middle class and really forget about the poor, right? So for us, it was really a way of uplifting. They like to call it the voiceless. I like to be called the silence. So really, like I felt like this was a campaign where it really created a space for the poor to really take control of the campaign, to say this is what we're fighting for, this is our voice, and it's not really an issue-based, but it's really around looking at all the different aspects of our lives that poverty impacts, right? And especially when it's in a system, right, in an economic system that doesn't, that dehumanizes, right, that humanizes corporations and dehumanizes people, right? We see when they tell us there's no money, it's not that there's no money, right? It's the lack of prioritizing human services, right? It's the lack of prioritizing people before profit, right? So when we see public dollars such as the TIF being misused and being used as corporate welfare, where we're told and are supposed to believe that our schools don't have money to educate our children, but yet you have millions to criminalize our children, right? When you tell us that there's no money to provide mental health services for our communities that have been traumatized, but you have money to create systems and institutions that criminalize our communities, so, right? So it's really about understanding the power we have as a class, as a poor people, and really identify, right? Because like as Liz had mentioned earlier, poverty, especially now with the lack of job creations, we've seen how jobs have gone down, right, and the criminalizations of our communities have gone up. So it's really going to take that power of the people to come together to shift that and to shift the way we prioritize how our spending. Right? Why is it that we're spending trillions on militarization and not on human services? So for us, it hit home to what we have been fighting for quality public education, for universal health care, right, for systems of nonviolence, right, to incorporate restorative systems in our communities instead of criminal justice systems. So it really resonated with the work we were doing locally and what our members had already been talking about, like we needed to really talk about the poorest struggle and take the focus out of the middle class.
Oh, that is awesome. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so I want to remind. No, that's okay. You know, I asked a question, you answered it, and I thought that was a beautiful story. Right, quite honestly, I was getting lost in the story. I'm not impatient.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, and she's the co-director of the Kairos Center and co-founder and coordinator of the Poverty Initiative. And we're also speaking with Carolina Gaete. She's the co-director of Blocks Together, and we'll be taking questions from our listening audience very, very shortly. If you're in the chat room, feel free to post right now. I know there are a few people in the chat room, and I thank you so much for joining us. The call-in number again is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. And if you happen to be looking at the episode page while you're listening, you'll see that number, I believe, at the top of the page on the left-hand side. Okay? So, Reverend Theoharis, can you give us a history of the Poor People's Campaign and the original platform, that Martin Luther King and the folks at SCLC envisioned?
Yeah, so a lot of what the Poor People's Campaign was doing, it was still in its pretty early stages. So in some ways, actually, before Dr. King was assassinated, it didn't really fully have a platform. But one thing that he was really focused on, and this was something that actually went back before the Poor People's Campaign, but was on jobs and income. And he was actually talking about both jobs and then income, like a guaranteed annual income when people weren't able to find jobs or weren't able to work jobs, even if there were jobs available. And so a lot of the focus really was on jobs and income. But then there were various platforms that were developed around the 68 campaign, some of them with more and more issues that were affecting people, and some of them, more focused on these questions of jobs and income. And so, that in our lives today, I mean, the idea of a right to a job and a living wage, the idea of a guaranteed annual income where everybody, could get what they need to survive. I mean, those are not the reality of people's lives right now. I mean, 64 million people in this country earn less than $15 an hour, even though there are 400 families who actually make $97,000 an hour. So this kind of income and wealth inequality and the low wages that people are making is a major issue. But also we have, even though the unemployment rate itself isn't so high, We have many, many, many people who are unemployed and just lost, confidence trying to find a job because the jobs just don't exist, or people that are working 2, 3, 4 jobs, in fact, trying to make a living for their families. And so I think in our day, actually talking about jobs and income, how people need a guaranteed income, how people need the right to a job at a living wage, is really important.
Wow. So, Kato, can you tell us some of the things that you're doing with the Poor People's Campaign in the Chicago area to support the national organization while addressing some of the specific needs of the people in Chicago?
Yes, actually, since January of this year, we have began to meet blocks together with organizations such as United Neighbors of the 35th Ward, the People's Tribune, Haven Corner. There's been about 30 people and different as individuals, more films that have come, and we meet once a month. We're working on developing a platform and a vision for what does it mean to work locally as we support the national vision. Understanding there's also opportunities for us to move forward on issues of living wage here locally, as there's a push for the 5 for 15, right? Pushing for universal health care, continue to fight against the privatization and closing of public schools, continuing to fight for the reinvestment of public dollars in our communities, right? And as we also support the national call for a moral revival. So locally, we've been meeting. We had Alderman Carlos Rose from the 35th Ward this May when we had a local tent revival come out and endorse the campaign. So right as we're meeting, we're trying to figure out opportunities. What could this mean locally in pushing the poor people's agenda in Chicago?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, co-director of the Kairos Center and co-founder and coordinator of the Poverty Initiative. We're also speaking with Carolina Gaete, or fondly known as Caro. She is the co-director of Blocks Together. We'll be taking questions from our listening audience. You can start calling in now, as a matter of fact. And chat room, the call-in number is 347-884-8121. And while we're waiting for you to call, I just want to take a moment to let folks know how they can strengthen their organization's Giving Tuesday efforts by participating in Webinar Wednesdays. So every Wednesday from October 25th to December 6th, I'm going to be conducting webinars to help organizations strengthen their fundraising efforts for the year in fundraising and beyond. So if you are interested, give me a call at 773-571-3886, or you can email me at consulting@valeriefleonard.com. Do that for further information. So I'm going to remind you one more time, if you have any questions that you want to call in, the number is 347-884-8121, and you can feel free to post questions in our chat room. I know, Audrey, you had a question around what exactly the campaign is doing in Chicago. I believe Cottle answered that. If there's something that we didn't address, feel free to post it. And Tamika Flowers, I see that you're in the chat room as well. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to do so. Okay.
And then, Valerie, if you can also let her know that we meet the second Saturday of every month from 1 to 3 at 3711 West Chicago Avenue.
3711 West Chicago.
And Valerie, I was thinking maybe I could say a little bit about what's happening, on a national level, but that's also going to be happening on a state level, which is a couple of things. I mean, we are in the process nationally of traveling around the country and connecting up with state organizing committees, because in the spring of 2018, in 25 states across the country and in Washington, D.C., folks will be inaugurating a season of 40 days of nonviolent moral resistance, including doing nonviolent obedience. And that will be happening in state capitals, 25 state capitals across the country, as well as in D.C. And that will be focused on, this kind of larger moral agenda. The way we're developing it is through a project we have going on right now called The Souls of Poor Folks, Auditing America 50 years since the Poor People's Campaign challenge on racism, on poverty, on militarism, and on our national morality. And so that audit is happening, and that's helping us to establish the agenda for the Poor People's Campaign, on a state and a national level. We're kind of looking at, over the past 50 years, what has been going on, what has worked, what might have worked if it had been able to be implemented, to be able to then suggest forward, what kind of set of demands and platform do we need for this nation. And, so far, we're coming to Chicago next week. We've been in 7 other states in the last couple of weeks, and we're meeting over the course of these 3 months with folks from 37 different states across the country.
Wow.
And the response has been overwhelming. At the mass meetings we've been having, most of them have had, more than 1,000 people and about 50,000 people live streaming the event, watching the live stream of the event. And so clearly this is something that many people across the country are feeling is necessary and needed. I mean, this kind of coming together across all the lines that divide us, coming together across our various issues, saying, we need a common voice, and we're going to put our bodies on the line, and we're going to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. And so I know that folks in Illinois and Chicago will be part of that, and they'll be joined by people from all across the country.
Awesome. Okay, so Dr. Theoharis, as you were talking about the work that you do nationally, I got to thinking about the cultural divide there is here in this country that's really been heightened since the last presidential election for obvious reasons. I'm just wondering, by any chance, are you guys involving some of the folks from Appalachia and people who might have supported the current president, based on cultural issues, based on, even some of the race baiting? But many of these people, if you look at their socioeconomic profile, it's not that different from the folks who Caro and I live with, in North Lawndale. So are you guys also reaching out to those people, and is there a hope to kind of bridge some of the cultural divide, some of the racial divide that has gone on, in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really powerful so far. I mean, obviously, for many years, I've been engaged in building this Poor People's Campaign, but even just most recently in the last couple of months, when we were in Detroit, just a couple of weeks ago was the last one of these mass meetings and regional trainings we did, and we had welfare moms and welfare rights activists from all over Michigan, from Flint and from Detroit, folks that have been in the struggle for a long time. But they were also joined by Appalachian moms from Ohio. And folks sat in the room together and said, what are the issues that are affecting us? And really found that there were real commonalities, real similarities, and a common agenda that we could have. And that's we're finding that all across the country. We are in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we have Native folks and poor white folks and Latino folks and African American folks, all kind of in the same room saying, okay, this is the time for us to come together. And so we've seen a lot of interest actually from people of all cultures in this, and we feel that we've made it really a point that this Poor People's Campaign would have happened if Trump had not been elected, right? If we had had Hillary or 4 more years of Obama, it maybe has intensified because of what's happening with Trump in the White House and McConnell and Ryan, in the positions that they're in. But, we also see that part of how, we got into the situation that we're in is that in the 2016 election, there were 26 debates, presidential debates, in the primary and in the general election. Not one of those 26 debates had an hour focused on poverty, had an hour focused on a real discussion of health care. Not one of them had an hour discussion on voter suppression and systemic racism. Not one of them had an hour discussion on ecological devastation. These issues that are actually plaguing our society weren't even discussed. They didn't even, and those are the issues that are affecting people of all races, of all cultures, of all geographies across this country. And so that's who we're trying to unite and trying to bring into this campaign. I mean, we see this as a major organizing drive, and people are responding. I mean, at these mass meetings that we've been holding, thousands of people have been signing up to say, I want to be involved. I want to. And these are some folks that have been, fighting for freedom for a long time, and some folks that, are coming to this battle new, but see it as their battle and as their community's battle.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got 2 more questions from the chat room, and then I'll get back to you, get back to the floor of our interview. The first question is from Tamika Flowers. Her question is this campaign active in Los Angeles, the homeless capital of the country? Now, that I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing that with us, Tamika.
So just a couple weeks ago, we were in Los Angeles. We did a mass meeting there. There was more than 1,000 people that showed up for it. Before the mass meeting, the leaders of the Poor People's Campaign and folks from all across the state of California actually had a meeting with grassroots leaders in Skid Row, talked about the problem of growing homelessness, growing poverty. We had folks from the Salinas Homeless Union in the mix who are organizing at some of the homeless encampments that are being, ravaged and destroyed by the police and by others. And so we see homelessness as a major issue in this campaign, and we see every place across this country, including Los Angeles, needing to be, involved. And folks were very receptive there. So that was very encouraging.
Awesome. Now, is there a contact in LA that we might post? I know I don't expect you to have phone numbers memorized from people all around the country, but is there a way that you can maybe forward me the information? I could post it on the episode page for future reference, for Tamika and others from LA if they were interested in getting involved in LA. Or better yet, is there a directory?
I know. I'm trying to think. I think we're in the process of basically trying to put these state organizing committees connected. And so if folks go to poorpeoplescampaign.org, at this point you can probably just send an email to more of a general place. But that will then get us to send it to the local people in each state. And then we are working towards having a way that people can just directly find the leaders in each state and get involved and in touch. Okay, great. Okay, and then we've got one more question in our chat room. This is from Audrey Dunford. And Audrey is my neighbor in North Lawndale, and she is very, very actively engaged, and I'm hoping at some point maybe become part of this work. And Tamika Flowers just said, thank you so much for that information. But Audrey's question is, what exactly does moral revival mean? Are they speaking biblically, ethically, or what? That's a great question. So So at this point, the issues that people talk about in a moral way are very few. There are things like prayer in the schools and sexuality, and abortion, and whether Jesus was a founding member of the NRA. And we see that the issues of healthcare, of housing, of gentrification, of living wages, of police violence, that these are the real moral issues of our day. And so the call for a moral revival isn't a religious call. It's not an evangelical call. It's a call to say that our nation needs to change its priorities and focus on people and focus on the issues that impact people, but that it needs to be a reviving of a spirit of struggle, a spirit of equality and freedom, and that, we're going to tap into our deepest moral values in terms of loving our neighbor, in terms of taking care of everyone, in order to really change society for the better. And so we are asking for obviously impacted. This is not a campaign for poor people. This is a campaign with and led by poor people. It's also a campaign that has folks that identify as religious leaders, not from any particular religion, but from all the world's religions, saying that that these issues around taking care of one another in terms of equality and liberation and prosperity for all, like these are the issues that our faith traditions talk about, and that we actually need for there to be folks coming out from those faith communities, but then also from all communities, people of no faith and of faith, all saying, we need to revive the heart of our democracy. We need to change the direction our country is going in. We need to, revive a kind of moral sense of what's right and wrong, not what's left or right, but what's right and wrong.
Okay, awesome. Okay, ladies, I gotta ask you a question. I'm looking at our time. We had a number of questions that we have not yet gotten to. I'm enjoying this conversation. It seems that the ladies in the chat room are enjoying the conversation, but we've got quite a few more questions to go. My question to you is, shall we extend the time a little bit? And when I say a little bit, I'm talking about 10 to 15 minutes tops. Or shall we just do a hard stop, at 3 o'clock?
I have kids home from school today, but they seem to be happy, so I can do whatever needs to be done.
Okay, great. How about you, Kato?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking to me. I could do 10 more minutes.
Okay, 10 more minutes. All right. So with that said, I'm going to switch up the order of our questions in the event that we don't get through all of them. And the question that is at the top of mind, especially before we close the first hour, is the fact that there's going to be a meeting on Chicago's West Side, Kato. That's going to be in North Lawndale, in historic Stone Temple, where Dr. Martin Luther King did his organizing around fair housing issues. Can you tell us about that meeting?
Yes, we're very excited, first of all, to have Dr. William Barber and Reverend Liz Harris come out Thursday, October 12th. Doors open at 7. Program begins at 7:30. The address is 3622 West Douglas Boulevard. We're very excited to be host them on the West Side. Like you said, the history behind Stone Temple Church and what does it mean for them to be here for the moral revival this Thursday, October 12th. Everyone's invited. Please come out. Like I said, doors open at 7. Program begins at 7:30. What you can expect is testimonies from people in the state of Illinois and Indiana talking about like the 4 evils, which is environmentalism, militarization, racism and poverty, giving testimonies around how their lives have been impacted by those in those different areas. There's going to be music, culture. There'll be cultural events, and you will also be able to hear from Reverend Liz Harris, Theoharis, and Reverend Barbara.
Okay, awesome. And for you, Dr. Theoharis. I'm sorry?
That was great. No, that sounded really perfect. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah. Yes. And prior to that, we're going to have an opening, right, at Trinity United Church Christ, and that will have more of a national focus. Is that true? And then you'll drill down into training. Don't get me to describing this, Dr. Theoharis.
That'll be part of the training of folks here in Chicago that are preparing to be part of the 40-day action and continue supporting the national work. So that's a closed training. But on October 12th, that's open to everyone, and that's a public event.
I got it.
But part of the training, it's part of the preparation for the work.
Okay. All right. I got it. So, Dr. Theoharis, what were some of the successes and challenges of the original Poor People's Campaign, and what are some of the lessons learned that can be instructive for today?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what what we're trying to do these days is get people onto a similar page. The Poor People's Campaign of '68 happened very quickly, and Dr. King was killed before the plans for it were really able to develop in the way that they wanted them. There was a meeting in the middle of March of leaders. It was called the Minority Leaders Meeting, and at that meeting there were folks from the Jewish Federation and folks from Native American organizations and from welfare rights, and from a series of different. Cesar Chavez was supposed to actually be at that meeting, but he was actually in jail. So others, connected to the United Farm Workers and in that movement were there and in the mix. But what wasn't able to be done because there just wasn't quite the time for it was the kind of pulling together of a larger kind of network and vision so that campaign could continue into the future. And then what happened was a combination of the weather, so the Resurrection City that folks did in Washington, D.C., it rained like almost every day, and so it was really hard conditions. It was demoralizing for folks, and it was like the first time when poor whites from Appalachia and poor blacks from the Mississippi Delta, were really in a similar space, sharing lessons, and amazing connections were born. In fact, the original Rainbow Coalition in Chicago was basically birthed in the Poor People's Campaign in '68. Fred Hampton and folks really learned. Some of the leaders, Peggy Carey and other leaders, were actually a part of that. So anyways, I think a lot of what we're trying to do these days is learn those lessons and make deeper connections amongst these different struggles, and to also have this happening on a local, state level. So many of the policies that are affecting people actually are decided upon on a state level, and so to have a national movement that is really about nationalizing state-based movements and local movements is a lot of what we're trying to do, learning lessons from '67, '68, and so a lot of that. So that when we're done with the 40 days of moral resistance and action and organizing, that's not the culmination. That's the beginning. And we have leaders and strong statewide organizations who can really keep building this movement and who can keep holding people accountable for what needs to happen. And so I think a lot of that is trying to study history, also study how the powers that be, and in fact even the police, played a role in really trying to disrupt some of the work that was going on, and so try to figure out, how do we have a message that gets out? How do we have the kind of leadership that have the commitment and the capacity and the connection to be able to do something powerful and sustainable, so that we really build a movement and it's not just a moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. So, Caro, what are some of the lessons you've learned in your work with Blocks Together, and how might they be instructive for the Poor People's Campaign?
I think the importance of having ensuring that the community and residents and our members are equipped with tools, as you know, Valerie, we always go to you too, to making sure that it's so important for us how being able to have the knowledge, the know-how to be able to negotiate, right? That's, I think, a lot of the time we've been able to be successful in our campaigns because at the core we believe in ownership over buy-in. So all the campaigns are really rooted in our members and people directly impacted, and also in increasing capacity and ensuring folks have those tools, right? So it's not about me convincing you need to be liberated, but me working alongside of you and ensuring that you have the tools and the capacity to be able to move forward in your fight, right? And be there, like I said earlier, in the long haul, because our fight for self-determination, and it's not going to happen in a day or two, right? So we need to be embraced to have this fight for the long haul and be able to ensure people are equipped with, like, it's really important, like in our meetings, we've incorporated political education because it's really important for folks to have the historical context of the fight and of the movement, and also to understand the policies and the practices that we're fighting, right, that they're also rooted in the neoliberal economic policy, right? So in order for us to fight that monster you talked about, we have to understand what nourishes it, what keeps it going, right? Because a lot of the times we're trying to slay that monster, but we also feed it. So in order not to continue feeding it and making it stronger, we really need to understand, right, the context of our fight, and that it takes a lot of understanding. And for us, our biggest tool is knowledge and understanding those fights and who are the players.
Okay, great. So, Dr. Theoharis, you probably have answered a lot of this next question, but we wanted to get an overview of the work of the current Poor People's Campaign, you know, how it came to be revived, who the leaders are, what has been accomplished, and, you know, and for me, I'm interested in knowing who some of your partners are in Illinois, you know, whether it be from the city of Chicago or, you know, in other municipalities.
Yeah, so the Poor People's Campaign comes out of, you know, more than a decade of organizing and relationship building, both at the Kairos Center and Poverty Initiative has been doing over the years, as well as out of the Forward Together Moral Mondays movement of North Carolina. Currently the national co-chairs for this campaign are myself and the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, who is the architect of the Moral Mondays movement and a pastor in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and the former president of the North Carolina NAACP. So we have come together to co-chair the steering committee of the campaign, and that steering committee is made up of about 30 different leaders from various struggles across the country, folks from the Gulf Coast to the border to the Pacific Northwest, all kinds of struggles of poor people around sovereignty, around water, around healthcare, around, you know, all the issues that are impacting people. And so that steering committee helps to kind of oversee the direction of the campaign and has called for us to do these 15 mass meetings and public events in these 15 states across the country, as well as connect up with a small select group of local leaders, again, from 37 states across the country, who are forming Poor People's Campaign state organizing committees. And those state organizing committees are made up of, you know, groups like Blocks Together and leaders like Caro, who have committed to taking up this work of this campaign and helping to coordinate the work across, both cities and states across the country. And so, there's all kinds of organizations that have signed on to the campaign. We're still in the process of figuring out a more formal endorsement process. We actually won't announce and launch the Poor People's Campaign kind of more formally until December of 2017, where we really put out more of the plans for the spring mobilization, where for 40 days, people in 25 states and in Washington, D.C. will engage in nonviolent civil disobedience over a course of 6 weeks. So, at this point, that's the kind of the phase of development that we're in, and we're working to kind of identify local leaders in this different states who are willing to kind of commit and hold the work and connect people across all kinds of different organizations. Because this isn't about building up an organization. Kairos Center and Repairers of the Breach River Barbers organization, aren't trying to build up our organizations. We're trying to make sure that on a state level, people across various organizations are able to come together and build something that's powerful and that can really launch a movement, like be a vehicle to build a movement, an anti-poverty, anti-racist movement in this country. And so we feel very good about where this work is heading. Real leaders, real heroes and heroines across the country have stepped forward and said, we are committed to this. Some folks that have been in the struggle before have said to us, I have time to suit up one last time, and we want, I want this struggle to be the one that I suit up for. And then again, younger people are saying, things are not going well, so we got to do something about this. So that's kind of how it is. Folks have come together. We're at the kind of initial phases of this campaign. We see it as a starting point. We see the 50th anniversary of what King was doing, not as a commemoration. We're tired of commemorations where people just honor what people did before. And it's also very hard to commemorate something that still hasn't achieved what it needs to achieve. I mean, there were real wins out of the Poor People's Campaign of '68, but poverty, as we talked about at the beginning of this show, is worse than ever. And so we're not interested in commemorating. We're interested in reaching back into what Dr. King was doing, into what other leaders were doing back in '67, '68, and seeing where they left off and seeing if we can take up that work. Awesome. And on that note, I got one last question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Dr. Theoharis. What steps do you think we need to take in order to begin to make progress toward Dr. Martin Luther King's vision of eradicating poverty in America? It's a great question. We see that the two main goals of this stage of the campaign are to shift the moral narrative, get us talking and debating and acting and working around the issue of poverty, and then to build the power in local communities, in states, to be able to not just win a policy change or a program, but to start to shift what is politically and economically and socially possible. And so the two goals of this campaign are to shift that narrative and to build power, because we think by changing the way that people think and the way that people believe, we are able to win people that ending poverty is possible, and in fact what needs to be done and what should be done and what can be done. And this is how we're going to do it, with these sets of programs and policies, but then also with having a political base of poor people, in large numbers who are organized and united. That's what we're trying to do, is to build the vehicle that will become a movement that can hold the powers that be accountable for what is going on in our country and world, and make things better for everyone.
Okay, awesome. Okay, Caro, same question for you.
Definitely, as was stated, and continue doing, I think, at the core, beginning to understand that doing that political education so that we understand how the system is, we are in the conditions we are by design, right? Somebody's making money off of our poverty. Yeah, so I think we need to understand, I think it's really important to have that political education piece so people understand what are the systems and structures that created our conditions. One, bringing people together, equipping folks with the tools and capacity to lead the fight, right, for the long haul. Because I think it is possible to eradicate poverty and to really push forward an agenda, a vision, right, and exert our power, right, because a lot of times we give away our power by thinking outside entities have power to give us what we want. And now we don't realize that we have the power, right, and that what they are, they're just gatekeepers, right, but we give them the power when we don't exert ours as a community. So I think it's very important that we realize where the power lies and that we don't give it away, and that we're clear in creating our vision and our values, right, and in our practices. I think it's important that that's why I really the moral revival really resonates with our work, because I think it's so important for us to have a clear vision and be valued and be principled in our practices, right? We have to be able to say that our work is rooted in this moral work, work that is based off of our principles. So I think we're taking those first steps, and we just need to continue building and coming together as the people that have been directly impacted and have been able to be resilient and survive, right? But these are not the conditions that we are supposed to engage in. So this whole thing that this is our cross to bear, that's BS, right? And there's somebody making money off of our conditions.
Yes. We've come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, co-director of the Kairos Center and co-founder and coordinator of the Poverty Initiative, as well as Carolina Gaete. She's the co-director of Blocks Together, for being our guest today. So one last word before we go, ladies. Are there any parting thoughts, and can you tell us how we can reach you, how we can sign on to this work?
See you October 12th.
Yep, good.
Go
for it, Carol. Sorry. Exactly.
The October 12th. Once again, the address is 3622 West Douglas Boulevard, the Historic Stone Temple Church. Please be there. We're waiting for you.
Yes. And how might people contact you in the event that they want to
if they
talk
need
to you
more
about Blocks
information
Together or the campaign?
They can call Blocks Together's number 773-940-2319. Our website is www.btchicago.org.
Okay, and you have information also about the local level campaign. Is that correct?
All that is on the website, yes. We meet the second Saturday of every month at Blocks Together from 1 to 3. The address is 3711 West Chicago Avenue.
Okay, great. And you, Dr. Theoharis?
So, again, I encourage folks to come out October 12th. Myself and others will be there, and looking forward to it. For more information in general about the Poor People's Campaign, you can go to poorpeoplescampaign.org, or you can check out the Kairos Center's website or the Repairers of the Breach website. Kairos Center is Kairos, Kairos Center, CENTER.org. You can reach me and others through our website, and there's educational materials and quotes and videos on both of those websites, so it's really worth checking out and using in your community. So, but it's been great to be on this radio show with you, and very impressed by the work that's happening out of Chicago, and the work that Blocks Together is doing. So looking forward to doing more in the future together.
Okay, great. And I hope to meet you on the 12th. And I thank Kato for all the hard work that she does in Chicago and beyond. Okay, so I want to thank you're welcome. Thank our listening audience for bearing with us and sticking with us till the very end. So thank you for listening to Nonprofit U Blog Radio Talk Show today. The show will be available for download within about an hour or so. Be sure to join us next week when our guest will be Daniel Ash. Daniel is the Chief Marketing Officer at the Chicago Community Trust, and he'll share tactics on storytelling in the run-up to Giving Tuesday. Alrighty, so until then, you take care, and always think of Moral Mondays. Bye-bye.
Get to Old Navy today only. Great gifts like blankets and slippers for the family are just $5, and Adora boots for women, girls, and toddler girls are just $12. Hurry, it ends tonight at Old Navy. Valid 12/14, excludes boys, select styles, in stores only. Get to Old Navy today only. Great gifts like blankets and slippers for the family are just $5, and Adora boots for women, girls, and toddler girls are just $12. Hurry, it ends tonight at Old Navy. Valid 12/14, excludes boys, select styles, in stores only.